Welcome to the Dynasty Deep Dive, where we go beyond the surface and into depths unknown. I'm going deep today with my boy Dave Kluge from Football Guys. Dave, welcome to the party.
Thanks a lot for having me, man. This is fun. We were talking briefly pre-show about how it can be a little bit tough to talk Dynasty in season, but in my opinion, I host the Dynasty show over on Football Guys, so I do redraft content and Dynasty content. This is like my favorite time to make Dynasty trades because everybody gets so entrenched in player values in the offseason, and they feel like they can't move at all in Dynasty. These first few weeks are one of like the rare windows where I feel like you can make some really big dynasty trades. So excited to talk about some big names today and hopefully get the gears turning for the audience to find some trades out there.
Yeah, man. I speaking of like gears turning, when I saw the Joe Burrow news that he was going to be out for 3 months, I just went like after Jamar Chase in every league that I didn't have him, and quick declines across the board. They were like fair offers too, but we'll see. A couple weeks, maybe he has a bad week. I'll circle back on that. But to your point, like we're far 2 weeks in, you can start to kind of see some of the data and put it together and start to say, hey, maybe it is time to panic on some of these guys. Maybe this guy is a buy low. Maybe this guy's a buy high, or, he's at a high now, but it's only going to go up from here. So we've got some players we're really excited to talk about. And I think a good example of like a potential buy high, I'd love to hear your sentiment on it, starting with the Thursday night game from week 2, was Tucker Kraft. Huge performance, over 100 yards, receiving touchdown in back-to-back weeks. Looks like he is a focal point of the offense, as he was kind of talked up to be throughout the offseason. We were talking on another show I do on Fridays. We do Sleep Stream Stash, and we talk through some of the different, dynamics more from a redraft lens. But someone was asking, like, where are you ranking Tucker Kraft in Dynasty? And I was able to put like 4 tight end names ahead of him before I started saying, hey, like tight end 5 might be where I could land, like 5 to 7 range. So where are your thoughts? Am I getting ahead of my skis? Am I overreacting after 2 weeks? Or do you think this guy could be like George Kittle 2.0? And where are you looking at him?
Yeah, tight end 4, tight end 5. I've got him in a tier with TJ Hawkinson. So right there, like the guys that I've got clearly ahead of him, Brock Bowers, Trey McBride, and Tyler Warren. And that's it. And then like once you get to that 4-5 discussion, it's like, do you want to go TJ Hawkinson or do you want to go Tucker Kraft? But this guy, he's just like so good. And it's as simple as that. Last year, what really piqued my interest, like the number one thing that I look for with tight ends is, can you create after the catch? And we're not going to talk about him in this show, but like that's why I like Terrence Ferguson so much. Led all college football players in yards after the catch per reception last year. That's what Tucker Kraft did last year in the NFL. Now, it wasn't on a huge target share, so there was some pause there, but now we see him in a growing role, and he was still 3rd in the league in yards after the catch per reception through these first 2 weeks. He's a young guy. He's got all of the athletic measurables that we care about. He's looked really good through these first couple of weeks. And I could nitpick his game a little bit. Like, his releases off the line of scrimmage might not be the best, but it doesn't really matter when you've got Matt LaFleur as your head coach, a guy who knows how to maximize every single player's skill sets. They get him off the line of scrimmage in the slot, so he's got more room to work with. They put him in motion. We see him regularly. We haven't seen it yet this year, but a lot last year. They would motion him in to be that tush-push quarterback as well. So a guy who's got athleticism, Matt LaFleur knows it. They scheme up touches to get him in space. And once he gets the ball in the open field, he's a freight train. Like nobody's bringing him down on their own. It's going to, like you said, kind of like a light George Kittle. You just need a gang of guys to get on him and hope that they can bring him down. Still a young guy on an ascending offense. There's really not much to like. And I think a lot of people might hear like tight end 4, tight end 5 and say like, that's crazy. You guys are being overreactive. I think this is more of a testament to like how bad the tight end landscape is right now, that once you get past those top 3, it really is pretty murky. And I think that I'm going for upside there, and Tucker Kraft is a ton of it.
Yeah, and like TJ Hawkinson, you mentioned him, like been pretty uninspired through 2 weeks with the usage with McCarthy. Again, we don't want to overreact there, but you just love seeing Kraft kind of taking on more of a featured role. And yeah, I think a week ago I was saying I'd probably still take Loveland ahead of him. like for the time being, I just got to cool off on my Loveland love. Like I've been so high on him all off season. I was the first person to say like, this is going to be the first tight end off the board in the draft. And so when that happened, I kind of doubled down like, yeah, Andy's going to be productive immediately, right? Just like a top 10 pick would. But what the Bears are doing with their first and second round picks, that's a whole nother story for a different day. But yeah, Tucker Kraft, let's pull him up on the player profiler page just because, like, to your point, I think there's some really interesting call outs here. The athletic measurables on the right side across the board above the 68th percentile. He's got the athleticism we look for. I always think it's funny he's a third round draft pick and was actually taken after Luke Musgrave, who was picked in the second round that same year and has completely usurped him at this point to where Musgrave's in that kind of tight end 2 reserve role. And then just for everybody else who's a fan of Player Profiler, we've done a bit of a makeover with our advanced stats and metrics. So I'd encourage you to check out some of the player pages. But as you can see across the board here, a lot of stats where Tucker Kraft's a top 5, number 1 tight end, depending on what you're looking at. The one that sticks out to me is that 93.6% snap share. I'm going to take that every single day of the week. So you heard it here first from your boys, Johnny and Dave, on the Dynasty Deep Dive. You're not crazy if you're going out and you're trying to buy Tucker Kraft right now. You're probably paying an arm and a leg. You may want to wait till he doesn't have a 25-point game and kind of just like keep him on your radar a little bit, see if you can get a slight discount. But at the same time, looks like it's not fool's gold. He's going to continue to be a big role in that offense.
Yeah, you're not going to get any pushback from me on that one.
Cool. So back on that Thursday night game and back on a question that I got on another show that I'm like, it was actually kind of interesting. And you've got this guy's jersey in your background, is Jayden Daniels or Lamar Jackson in Dynasty. Thought it was really interesting because going into the season, a lot of people had penciled in Jayden Daniels as QB1 in Dynasty, right? Like the age, the amazing rookie year, seeing a little bit less of like that explosive upside, those 30-point games we were hoping for. It's only 2 weeks, right? But like we just haven't seen what I think we were hoping to see from Jayden Daniels at this point, where Lamar, it's just more of the same. This guy's just going out and just torching defenses and just obliterating them and giving you 30-point weeks, almost like you can pencil it, etch it in stone, right? So in Dynasty right now, Lamar Jackson or Jayden Daniels?
I still have Daniels as my QB1 despite the 2 bad weeks, but when I see that 4-year age gap, to me that's the biggest pusher here than anything else. And then he's also got over 4 years on Josh Allen as well, and that's why I've had him as my QB1 throughout the preseason, throughout the offseason, and I just haven't seen enough through the first couple of weeks to move off of that. And again, like when you're talking about this top 3, it feels so similar to the tight ends. Like it's just that there isn't really anybody else. You've got Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Jayden Daniels, Jalen Hurts. You feel really good about those 4, and then it just feels like you're kind of dumpster diving after that, especially now with Joe Burrow expected to miss the majority of this year. Really dings his dynasty value too. Sophomore slumps are common, and we see this all the time. So, well, I've got him as my QB1. He's a guy that, is crazy as it sounds, like I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. Even though I have him as my QB1, I was still trying to move him this offseason because it's just so hard to maintain that sort of pace that he was on as a rookie. So my favorite trade that I pulled off this offseason involving Jayden Daniels was I was able to get Brock Purdy and 2 2027 first-round picks, and I feel really happy about that when you can tier down. And the quarterback landscape right now, where the tight end landscape, it's kind of like there's nobody. The quarterback landscape is almost the opposite. Like there are so many guys out there that can produce that if you were playing Dynasty 5 years ago, you'd see like 10 of the top 12 picks in round 1 were all quarterbacks. Like everybody was so thirsty to get those QB1s on their team and then still have that quarterback that they can plug into their super flex spot. Now it's just changed. Like you could have got Daniel Jones in round 13 of a startup this year. Last year, you could have gotten Sam Darnold in round 18 of a startup. I'm not seeing that same premium value from quarterbacks that I have in years past. So I'm holding it down with Jayden Daniels because he's just 24 years old. I don't want to overreact, especially to a primetime game against one of the league's best defenses. So while I've got him atop the rankings, I just think it's a good move to try to trade back where you can. And if you've got Jayden Daniels and you could move back to a Drake May or a Justin Herbert or a Brock Purdy or a Kaleb Williams and still get additional capital on top of that, I think that's the best move you can make in Dynasty.
Yeah, I like all that. Agree with all of it. I'll play devil's advocate for one more second here. And let's say the trend continues for 3 or 4 more weeks. You know your team's going to be a contender. Lamar is still putting up 30-point games. You want the championship this year. Are you calling the person crazy who accepts that 1-for-1 trade?
Yeah, and I don't even know if you could do it 1-for-1 at this point. I feel like because of what we've seen through the first 2 weeks, as much as we preach patience in Dynasty, if you're talking 3, 4 weeks out from now where Jayden Daniels' struggles continue and Lamar Jackson keeps doing what he's doing, we're gonna see that flip pretty quickly. And I think at
Right.
that point, you might have to trade Jayden Daniels in a second to get Lamar Jackson. If you're contending though, and Lamar Jackson keeps doing what he's doing as the overall QB1 and Jayden Daniels has these up and down games, I might have to revisit my stance then. But for now, I'm still pretty confident in keeping Jayden Daniels atop that list.
I like it, dude. Stand strong, own your takes. I love it. So, it's talking about taking responsibility for some misses. A guy I've been like incredibly high on all off season is Travis Hunter. Like I just thought the talent is so spectacular, and the usage has not been what we've wanted to see. Right, like in week 1, it was great. He was
Mhm.
participating in 90% of the routes for the team. So the use, I think the snap share was around 65%. But what's really important with a guy like him is you want to dig into the route participation,
Right.
right? Like when Trevor Lawrence is throwing the ball, is Travis Hunter running a route? And 90% of the time in week 1, that was the case. That fell to 64% in week 2, which is like not good. Like not, we don't want that on our fantasy team bad. Like, and the slot usage is still encouraging over 50%, but they played him on defense a lot in week 2. And I think it could change week to week. The Bengals had 2 really good receivers that they wanted to kind of get him some extra attention on that side of the ball. But are you concerned with Travis Hunter going forward?
Yes and no. I'm mostly concerned because I thought he looked pretty good at DB, and I've heard a lot of people nitpicking what he did on defense. I mean, he had a few pass breakups that were spectacular. That like he displayed the ball skills that made him the second overall pick. I think the most promising thing here, and first of all, I was completely with you on this one, Johnny. Like I was pounding the table for Travis Hunter. I do the Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. There was a person in the industry that ranked Travis Hunter higher than I did in redraft rankings this year. I'm just such a big believer in the talent and the ball skills and the athleticism. I really see the ceiling for him kind of playing that slot role in this Liam Cohen offense, just like Chris Godwin did last year when he was a top 2 receiver before getting hurt.
Right.
I think the most promising thing to take away from week 2 is how awful Brian Thomas Jr. looked. I mean, like
Right.
they can't they wanted him to be a complementary piece. And what we saw last year, Brian Thomas Jr. was at his best when he was just running vertical routes, leaning on his straight line speed and getting behind defenses. Last week they did try playing him in the slot a little bit more, and he was running these in-breaking routes and these short crossers that are typically great for fantasy football, but he almost plays like he's scared, like he doesn't want to take a hit, like he wasn't really
Terrified.
going for balls. Yeah, it was just like a weird game, and it was so out of what Brian Thomas Jr. does well. Like Liam Cohen was really trying to because they lost that slot role. Like Travis Hunter, they needed him on defense. Travis Hunter, a super twitched up natural slot receiver. They tried putting a square peg into a round hole with Brian Thomas Jr. taking those short and intermediate targets, and that's just not who he is. So, well, yes, I'm really concerned about the week 2 usage. The hope that I have here is that Liam Cohen is smart enough to go back to the film and say, well, that is not going to work. And we definitely can't do this again. I mean, you look at James Gladstone, an offensive minded GM, Liam Cohen, an offensive minded head coach. I've got to imagine that they want to get this offense on track before anything else. And when you're going up against the best 1-2 wide receiver punch in the league in Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, I understand wanting to put a little bit of that firepower on the defensive side of the ball. It is hard to get a read on what their plans are going to be. But that offense, the passing game especially, was just so atrocious last week. I think they got to get Travis Hunter back out there and get back closer to that week 1 usage.
Yeah, it was like what really concerned me was like third downs in the red zone with the game on the line, and Hunter's
I
not
know.
out there on a passing down. I'm like the second overall pick. Like I have defended you guys and said that you knew what you were doing. And yeah, then you see like a Diami Brown who I like, but like touchdown go right through his hands, would have been his
Mhm.
second touchdown of the game, and it's just like you put yourself there and you're like, man, if he's throwing that to Travis Hunter, he's not dropping that pass, right? And so uh, just for concrete, actionable advice for fantasy owners, I think my strategy going forward is like holding Travis Hunter in Dynasty for better days ahead, but benching him for now in redraft until we start to see like what we want to see. What are your thoughts there?
I'd say Travis Hunter's a buy right now. I still
Nice.
believe in the talent. I think that he is such a good player, and I think that like this week one, if you just try to think schematically, like how they're going to game plan for Travis Hunter on any given week, is there any matchup that they're going to want him on defense for more than a matchup against Jamar Chase and T. Higgins? No, I don't think so. Like maybe when they have to go up against Tampa Bay, which they're going to have to do soon, maybe with Mike Evans and Mecca Book out there, maybe again, they'll want him a little bit more on defense, but I think they're going to reserve his defensive play for these matchups where they're going against stellar receivers. And I went through the whole schedule today, the remaining schedule for the Jaguars, and I think there's going to be a lot more offense than there is defense in the future. So I think right now, I mean, just that you and I, two like very staunch Travis Hunter truthers, are even having this conversation, to me, says that a buy window has opened up and it can close as soon as next Sunday. So go out there and try to get a deal done now while you can.
Yeah, I love it. And I've said, like, again, I've put some pretty bold stances out there that this guy could be like the next Jamar Chase. I think it's
Yeah.
a different type of role, but like similar type of talent. I also threw Justin Jefferson in that name. And I remembered looking back and I was like, okay, I know Jamar Chase had like a touchdown his first week in the pros, because I just remember victory lapping immediately that like I got him at such a discount because people were saying he couldn't catch the football.
Yep.
And then I was like, I'm pretty sure Justin Jefferson hit the ground running too, because I think of that first touchdown where he hit the gritty crossing the line.
I think that was like week 6 or week 7, right?
I think it was week 3, because I'm looking at
Right.
his first 2 games, 4.6 points, 7.4 points.
He got dropped
game.
in a ton of redraft leagues.
Yeah, exactly. And I bought low in a couple instances in redraft that year because I really liked him. But 30 points in week 3. So not everybody, even the best of the best, hit the ground like flying out of the gates their first few weeks. His snap share, Justin Jefferson, was 69% week 1, 54% week 2 of his rookie year. And then they bumped him up to 78% and he started producing, right? So that's sort of for you truthers, for you Travis Hunter people who are looking for maybe a light at the end of the tunnel here, like could come next week. I've been saying it's going to happen each week the past 2 weeks. He's been in my lineups in redraft and in Dynasty, and I'm like, all right, I got to cool it. I cannot start Travis Hunter over Devontae Adams again. I knew I shouldn't have done it, but I was like projected to win pretty big on this guy, and I'm like, this is an assert your dominance move. You know what I mean? And there's a time and a place to assert your dominance in your fantasy leagues against your buddies.
Yeah, I still think he's a good player, and I'm glad that you brought up those first couple of weeks from Justin Jefferson too, because like that was another one. Like people love Justin Jefferson, and then so quickly we got like the preseason reports that he was losing snaps to Olabisi Johnson.
Yeah,
those 4 weeks to start the year, and it opened up a buying window for a guy that we knew was an otherworldly talent, and you don't get those often. So I know you talked about Colson Loveland at the top of the show. Didn't like dive deep into that, but like a lot of these guys that I had strong pre-draft and off-season reads on that I really liked, I'm definitely not going to like in redraft. Sure, I'm benching Travion Henderson and I'm benching RJ Harvey, but in Dynasty, we're not playing for the next 15 weeks. We're playing long-term here. And I still have faith that Travis Hunter, Colson Loveland, RJ Harvey, Travion Henderson, all these guys that redraft managers are panicking about, I still have faith that long-term they'll be good NFL players.
Right. What's my boy Aaron Rodgers say? Relax, right? We just all gotta relax sometimes. And RJ Harvey's another great example, like a guy who's looked good in the limited burn he has gotten. Sean Payton just kind of tantalizing us with that usage, keeping Tyler Bidet on the field still. After there was a quote coming out like, I'm not used to feeding 3 backs. I got to figure out how to make it 2 backs. And then just like proceeds to give Tyler Bidet like high value screens and touches. And it's just
got
like
some Adam Prentice last week. Like he made a committee last week just because that's what he does. Yeah.
Yeah. So awesome start to the show, but guys, do not go anywhere because we are going to dive into some of the people who are even crazier when we get back.
Pour one out for an incredible best ball season. It was a breakout 2025 for Fast Draft, but now The NFL action has started. That means it's DFS season. That's right. You might think, oh, wow, DFS, I can't win DFS. Oh, but you can on Fast Draft. You just pick any 6 guys and you put them in a handful of booster spots. There's no salary rubric you have to follow. You're not going up against thousands of killer bots in these tournaments. Oh, no. These are regular people grabbing their 6 favorite plays of the week, and that's all you have to do. And we post the ownership so that you can choose how much chalk you want. There is no drafting. It's called the Quick 6 Super Slam. The Quick 6 Super Slam is the signature DFS contest at Fast Draft. It is changing DFS. We are making DFS great again. So go to fastdraft.app and use your host promo code for a $50.
Yeah, I love that Quick 6 Super Slam, because in theory, you could build a lineup last week that had Amon-Ra St. Brown, Malik Neighbors, throw some Jahmyr Gibbs in there, Bijan Robinson, any 6 players you want. You're not drafting against anybody. You've just got to pick the right 6 players who are going to score the most points that week. I like that. I also like the Flex 6 Frenzy, where you are drafting against people and you're, picking the top 60 players because there's 10 people and you're each taking six players to build your team. I think the guy who won that last week took Neighbors with his first pick and Wan'Dale Robinson with his last pick. I was like, dude, what are you like? I looked at it. I'm like, nobody's going to beat this guy, because like, that's a pretty good call. Like he is not 60 in your flex rankings or in anybody's flex rankings last week. But this, that's the type of stuff that makes you think like, the NFL's rigged, and some people know some stuff that I don't, because like I was picking RJ Harvey pretty frequently with that last pick. I'm like, okay, showed out in week 1. It's going to get more usage in week 2. Again, pie on my face with that one. But let's talk about a little bit about Wan'Dale, man. You were saying like, I gave you a show sheet and you're like, hey, let's throw a little Wan'Dale in there, because like, why not? It was crazy. They're using this guy downfield, had a phenomenal game. My question for you would be, we know what we loved last week from Wan'Dale was that he was getting deep downfield targets from Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson seemed to channel that like youth Russell, who was throwing it deep and being fantastic. Do you think Wan'Dale could keep up that type of production and be relevant with Jackson Dart stepping in eventually?
But yeah, Jackson Dart, he's a gunslinger too. So he's
Right.
a ball downfield. But I also think that Russell Wilson bought himself some time with that
For sure.
performance. I mean, like you said, vintage Russ. And we haven't really seen that moon ball in his bag over the last few years. But I think at a certain point, like halfway through the game, he was just like, you know what? Malik Neighbors is down there somewhere. I'm just going to huck it downfield and let him make a play. And it ended up working out pretty well for him. So I don't know if they're going to shy away from that too much. But Wan'Dale, like, I'm such a big fan of the talent. And I remember like the first time that I saw him, I was watching the Citrus Bowl on like a random afternoon day. And I was just like, I really like this guy. He went for 10 catches, 170 yards in that game. And right now he's pulling 18 targets for the first 2 weeks, which is 14th most in the NFL. But the big thing for me is you talk about the vertical routes, getting deeper downfield. His average depth of target has more than doubled from last year. Last year, it was sitting at 4.9. So far this year, it's at 10.4. So it took him some time, I think, to come back from that ACL injury where he lost some of his downfield speed a little bit. We saw him kind of as this extension of the run game, just catching balls 2, 3, 4 yards off the line of scrimmage, trying to make a defender miss and going down. But if he can get back to the player he was at Kentucky, where he can do that, he can break tackles and he can run through defenders while also adding in the vertical element as well. There's such a high ceiling here. I mean, this guy had over 130 targets last year. He's maintaining that same target volume this year, but now he's doing it and getting much more valuable and efficient touches. So this is a guy that I think a lot of people had just like clowned and left for dead after last year because of how inefficient he was. But now we're seeing the entire offense look better, a better role for him. He's a guy right now, like as soon as we get off this show, I'm sending second round picks out or like offers my second round picks to see if I can get Wan'Dale Robinson, because this is a guy that going forward, I think you can plug in your flex where it was kind of a high floor, low ceiling play. Now you've still got the high floor, but you also have a very high ceiling. And that really, really entices me.
Yeah, I love it. I'm kind of mad you didn't do the bit about his like route chart. Can you tell me what you shared before the show? Because I thought it was hilarious.
I shared it on Twitter yesterday, and I said, like, if you showed me this route chart blind and asked me who the receiver was, I guess 180 different guys before Wan'Dale Robinson. Because you look at it yesterday, it was nothing but vertical routes, and like that's not something we've seen from Wan'Dale in the NFL, but it's something that we know he can do from his time in Kentucky. So yeah, really excited here. And you reminded me pre-show that Will Levis was his quarterback in college. Another just like close his eyes and chuck it downfield type of quarterback. And whether it's Russell Wilson or Jackson Dart, we're going to be looking at that same style of quarterback play in New York this year.
Yeah, and I just pulled up like his profiler page in the background. Sneaky 4.44 speed guy.
Yep.
So he's got wheels, to your point, kind of like, I don't think people see him as like a top end speed kind of guy, but he's got speed and quickness to separate underneath. And now we're seeing the downfield usage. So I like what you said about like, still you've always loved him as a floor play, but now you can maybe see some more ceiling outcomes with the passing game that they have in New York that is going to be more downfield attack, whether it's Russ Wilson or Jackson Dart. So had to talk a little Wan'Dale. Like, we're on a high talking about this guy who's like having a bit of a career resurgence. Now I'm going to take you to the deepest depths of the low. And that is my boy, Kaleb Johnson. Like, what the fuck? Like, this is brutal. Like, 2 carries for 2 weeks. I'm pretty sure like either negative or 0 yards, couple of fumbles on kick returns. He touches like the kickoff this weekend or in week 2, touches the ball, but doesn't go back to get it. The Seahawks recover it for a touchdown. Like, I was telling my wife, I'm like, Mike Tomlin is going to build a doghouse and put it on the sidelines and make Kaleb Johnson sit in that thing. Like, this is brutal. And the worst part is like Jaylen Warren's doing all these like 6 jukes, 50-yard reception, and Aaron Rodgers is loving it. And he's like, I fucking hate rookies anyways. Like, this is, and then you've got Arthur Smith in there where you're like, even if he does see the field, like somehow Cordero Patterson is going to get, even though he's not even on the team, they're going to bring him back. They're going to be rushing Darnell Washington. Like, just the worst thoughts, the most intrusive thoughts are starting to enter my head about Kaleb Johnson, a guy that I have some dynasty ownership of. I'm like a couple of leagues. And so I'm kind of, the panic meter is pretty high for me. I think there's no choice but to hold, right? Because you don't want to sell him right now. We knew he would probably take a few weeks to get more involved with this offense. But just talk to me, like, what's your level of panic with him and how are you kind of handling it?
But I mean, panic, like if we're talking like on a scale of 1 to 10 for this year, it's like an 11 out of 10. Like, I don't know if he's going to see the field this year. And a lot of that isn't even anything to do with his talent. It's just the offense. Like, they've got a 41-year-old brittle quarterback playing under center. And, Jaylen Warren and Kenneth Gainwell, for as much as we want to knock them, there's 2 things that both of them do phenomenally, and that is pass block. And they need extra blockers out here because of Aaron Rodgers. And if you're going to miss a pass blocking assignment, which we got a lot of word that Kaleb Johnson was struggling with that in the preseason, you're not going to be able to get on the field with Aaron Rodgers. It's just as simple as that. And Kenneth Gainwell, I got to say, you remember when what was it, just a couple of weeks ago, Anthony Richardson took that blindside hit and got injured in the preseason game. Me, being the nerd I am, decided to go through all of this like 2022 Shane Steichen film to see kind of what the run blocking assignments were for running backs. And after watching like 3 hours of 2022 Eagles, my biggest takeaway was Kenneth Gainwell is a really, really good pass blocker. So that's why he has taken this role. But yeah, he's in the doghouse with Mike Tomlin and Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers. I just don't see that changing this year. I think there was this hope that he would just get like plopped into Najee Harris's old role, but that role doesn't even exist in this offense. Arthur Smith is kind of like the laughing stock of the NFL, but one thing he does really, really well is build offenses around the personnel that he has and ways to maximize those skill sets. That's why we see right now this team is playing over 50% of their snaps out of 12 personnel because they got Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth, 2 very good tight ends. So they're building an offense around what they have, and Kaleb Johnson just isn't a part of that. So it's not like if something happens, they can just plop Kaleb Johnson into Jaylen Warren's role or Kenneth Gainwell's role, because they're asking the running backs to do things that Kaleb Johnson can't. So from a dynasty perspective, I guess the hope is that like Aaron Rodgers isn't a part of their 2026 plans and that they can rebuild the offense and go back into this power run scheme. But I think that Jaylen Warren is playing well enough that he has solidified a role for himself. So I don't know what to say Kaleb Johnson is right now, because I don't think you want to sell at this point. But I also feel like holding on to him is a bit of sunk cost fallacy. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. I don't really know what the best thing to do with Kaleb Johnson is. I think if there's somebody out there in your league that's still like really, really likes him and might be willing to part with like a 2028 first, because a lot of people spent first round picks on him this year. If you could push that out and get like a 2028 first, I might be willing to do that. I think it's probably too early to hit the panic meter and sell for a second. So I think he's just kind of stuck as a hold right now, unless you can get a future first for him.
Yeah. When you were talking about that, I'm like, man, the panic meter is only going up. And I think like for me, it's like if I'm a contender and someone's sending me an offer for like 3/4 of the value that he was before the season started, and I need the production now, then I would entertain that offer. Otherwise, I'm just going to hold on to him in Dynasty and hope that, things change either hopefully throughout the course of the season, like injuries happen. It could happen to Rodgers. It could happen to either of those two running backs, and he could get forced onto the field, which could be a good thing. I think the other interesting thing is, this is a Dynasty show, but you have to start thinking like, is this guy droppable in redraft? And I think the answer is probably yes, to your point around there's just no clear path to him getting involved in the next few weeks, which is we need to win now in redraft,
Yeah. And you talk about like 75% of your value from your rookie draft. Even that, it's so hard to put a finger on, because like valuations were so vast in rookie drafts this year. You kind of had like your big guys up top, your Ginties, your Hamptons, your Wards, your McMillans, and your Hunters. And then after that, it was the wild, wild west. Like people were taking whoever they wanted, wherever they wanted. I saw Kaleb Johnson going 106 in some drafts, and I saw him fall into like 204 in others. So I think that's why, like, if you've got Kaleb Johnson, I don't think it's a bad idea to go out there and test the waters and see what you can get in return, because there's a chance that like you drafted this guy early in the second round, and now you might be able to fetch a future first for him, even though he's underperforming. So, one of the more volatile players in rookie drafts to get a value on. And now after a couple of weeks, there still might be somebody out there holding on to hope.
Yeah. And I think the insight to gain going forward is like, never get too caught up on landing spot, right? Like people are like, oh my God, this is the nuts landing spot, like 300 carries incoming, right? And I have a guy who I like a lot. His name's Marvin Eloquent. I have him on my show sometimes, really sharp guy. And his big kind of sentiment on this is like, let draft capital be your proxy for landing spot. And I think this just goes back to show like, you'd rather have second round Judkins almost, at this point than Kaleb Johnson, the Browns suck. It's a bad landing spot. It's like, well, Judkins been with the team less than 2 weeks and led the team in rushing attempts and is clearly going to just be like holding it down. Right. And that's because the draft capital was there. They've invested in this guy, where Kaleb, he slipped in the draft. Third round was later than people thought. It was closer to the end of the third round where the Steelers were picking. And so, going forward, don't overcompensate on landing spot and don't disregard draft capital too much, because it is the biggest indicator of kind of future production. So awesome, man. That was like the hardest 5 minutes of my day. I'm sure probably going to be the worst time of the week for me, was looking back.
Cathartic for you at the same time, hopefully.
Yeah, a little bit, right? So back on a high, I'm a Denver Broncos fan. I know you live in Colorado Springs, and a guy who kind of had his coming out party this in week 2 was Troy Franklin, right? Like was the leader in snaps for the wide receiver position for the Denver Broncos, out snapping and out targeting Cortland Sutton, used in a variety of ways. He's always been a downfield vertical threat. He's got nice size and speed, but they were using him on like handoffs, crossers, moving him across the field, and he looked good. And the thing that is crazy to me is like, I'm a big eye test guy, and just like seeing what, trust in your eyes. And what I saw from him in year 1, I just was like, But when I'm watching him out there now, I'm like, this guy might be one of the most improved players in the league year over year. And that's kind of bold to say after just 2 weeks. But I mean, that's where my head is at with what I'm seeing from Troy Franklin. I think he's, Marvin Mims was who everybody thought was going to be the wide receiver 2 in that offense. He saw over 50% of the snaps in week 1, Marvin Mims did, which was kind of like, if you've been tracking Marvin Mims closely, like that's a victory lap. Like we've been looking to see his snap share get that uptick. Week 2, he goes right behind Troy Franklin and Cortland Sutton, back in that like 30% snap share range where he's kind of been throughout his career. So it looks like Troy Franklin is, he didn't do anything in week 2 to not earn that role going forward. What do you think? Is this guy a legit target for you in Dynasty? Are you buying what I'm selling here, or do you want to call me on my bullshit?
No, dude, I think he looked awesome. And I don't think you're like overselling it when you say that he looked like one of the most improved players. And I think that's why he fell to day 3 in the draft, because there were a lot of people that really got enamored with Troy Franklin through the draft process. And I remember thinking, like, this guy's just too thin. And I know that's like a silly knock to have on a player, because we've seen Devonta Smith and even Travis Hunter, who you and I both said that we liked, another very thin guy. But Troy Franklin was just like too thin, especially at that height, like 6'2" and just a string bean. Like that worried me a little bit. And he was also, like you said, it was a lot of downfield stuff. That's what he was very limited to in college. And I think the reason people got excited about him is because he was Bo Nix's wide receiver 1 in college. And they said, they did it. Like they paired these guys up. Like this is the new Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And obviously it didn't turn out to be that way. And there was a point in time, like in the pre-draft process, where a lot of people were saying he was a round 1, round 2 pick.
Yeah.
I didn't really see that, but he does have the skill set to be one of these day 3 outliers that we're always chasing after. 6'2", 4.41 speed, gigantic catch radius. But what really jumped out to me is that he's just bigger this year. Like you could tell he's been taking his creatine. Yeah. He's been lifting some weights and eating creatine and protein and doing all that sort of stuff. And we saw a huge change in usage yesterday, like where he was playing a lot of his slot. Like he's leading the Broncos right now in slot snaps, and we know how valuable that role can be. We didn't see him playing just these vertical routes like he did in his rookie season. We saw him kind of, I hate to say this, Michael Thomas maybe, slant boy, just like running these crossers across the middle of the field where he can catch the ball on an easy ball, where he can just turn it upfield and make plays after the catch. And that's exactly where we saw Michael Thomas, give us one of the best fantasy seasons ever just a few years ago. I think the pause that I have here more than anything else is just that it's Sean Payton, and like trying to get any sort of read on what his trends are going to be. Good luck. Like don't be surprised if next week it's Lucas Kroll getting all the work out of the slot.
Yeah, Pat Bryant all of a sudden seeing the second most snaps or something like that. Yeah,
exactly. So I think that's the fear, is like, I played fantasy football last year. I remember when Devon Vele was in this role for 2 weeks and everybody got way over their skis about Devon Vele. So I think that's what the fear is Sean Payton does game plan for individual games, and he will highlight a player for that week and then just cast him to the wayside immediately after. So I don't know how much I'm willing to give up here. I mean, Troy Franklin might just be available in waivers in some dynasty leagues out there. I think a lot of people were really disappointed by what they saw in the rookie season. And then they added Evan Ingram, they added Pat Bryant. And I think a lot of people would have just flat out dropped him. So if he's out there on waivers, sure, it's really tough to come by good players on waivers, and I'd splash a lot of fab on him. But I don't think I'm at the point where I want to give up like even a 3rd round pick for him yet, because what we saw was one disappointing season, a disappointing week 1, and then one pop game in week 2. That's not something that I'm willing to like trade away draft capital for yet.
Dude, I would so give up over round 3 for Troy Franklin. Like now that you say that, I'm going to go out and do that and see if somebody thinks like you. Cause like, I just like, I'm chasing ceiling here. Right. And like, I think to your point, like there is that QB connection with Nix and him, and he could be a solid, like earn a role in this offense. It's not always an immediate breakout. And he came out as a junior. He seemed like a guy who needed development, and he looks like he's done it. So in closing on Troy Franklin, I think we both agree, like he's passing the eye test after last week. I love what you said about like, if you're a dynasty sicko, you know what we're talking about. People were saying this guy was a 1st rounder. I've got people still in my inbox being like, oh yeah, he was first round grade on my model. Right. And like, now they're victory lapping it now. Right. It's like, well, where were you for the vast
19 games?
Yeah, exactly. So, but I think that there is something to take from that like he checked a lot of boxes that like the analytics people look for and the dynasty sickos look for. And now the production starting to catch up with what people thought was possible. I'm super intrigued by the guy. I don't think that the manager who owns him would want to sell him for a third, because they probably took him in the second or early third, and they're like, nope, I'm gonna play this out. You know what I mean? Now I'm finally starting to maybe get some return on my investment there. So, but again, we both agree, looks legit, could be a thing. We'll have to keep an eye on him closely. I think that's probably the biggest thing going forward. Let's close it out, man. Go back into the valley of the shadow of death with like another guy who I'm pretty close to in fantasy points this year. And that's Mark Andrews, man. Like, I don't know what to do with this guy, because the snap share's there. He's getting end zone targets. It's, he still feels like one of Lamar's go-to guys, but the production has just been terrible. What are you doing with him? Are you like in Dynasty? Are you trying to sell him while you can? Is he a buy low target? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I'm buying at this point. I just like he's 30 years old, and I really like there are so many red flags. Like you look at Mark Andrews' profile right now, and it's just like bah, 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 like red lights, and like it looks terrible. Like the production hasn't been there. He just turned 30 years old. But I'm a sicko like that in Dynasty. Like when everybody decides this player sucks, this player's toast, how do I get him off my roster? I'll just like dangle a 4th round pick and see if that's enough to get the deal done, or trade away, like a Troy Franklin. Like I would trade Troy Franklin for Mark Andrews right now. And if you look at the age curves for tight ends, like we don't typically see guys just like falling off the age cliff at age 30. That doesn't happen for tight ends. We see these guys regularly playing into their mid to late 30s, but even 30, 31, 32, 33, we still see elite production there. So what we've seen from this Ravens offense is a very different look this year than we saw last year. Like they are hyper targeting Zay Flowers right now. I think he's got like a 44% snap share, second best in the league. But like you said, we were so close to a Mark Andrews touchdown that just got pulled out of his hands on like a spectacular defensive effort yesterday. Yep. And if that is a touchdown, people aren't panicking, because then he's got a 9-point fantasy day, and that is more than good enough for a fantasy tight end. So I think here, I was being a little bit, dramatic to make a point. You're not getting him for a 4th round pick, but I think if you could trade a future 3rd for him, or a Troy Franklin, or one of these buzzy day 3 running backs right now for Mark Andrews, I think there's going to be better days ahead. I don't think we're ever going to see Mark Andrews in that 16 to 18 point per game player that he was, 3-4 years ago when they didn't have any wide receivers on the team. Now they have Zay Flowers. DeAndre Hopkins is going to take some end zone looks as well. So I think that lowers his ceiling a little bit. But this guy was still the tight end 5 last year. I think he's going to be fine long term. And I think that there are so many causes for concern right now that I think if you're selling right now, you're selling at the absolute bottom. And that's just something that I never really try to do.
Yeah. So first off, something that was interesting to me, just sidebar here. I think DeAndre Hopkins only played like 17% of the snaps last week, which was wild to me, because like couple of highlight plays, right? Yeah. And just like really caught me off guard there. And then the second thing I'll say is, I think you just gave me the quote of the show. I would trade Troy Franklin for Mark Andrews right now. I like it. I agree with it, even though I just told you I like Troy Franklin. And I like it a lot, because I think it's actually tangible for Dynasty owners. You get a guy who pops one week. You've got a solid vet who's been productive his whole career, who's a little disappointing through 2 weeks. Like, these are the types of offers that bring you Dynasty glory, right? So, dude, Dave, this has been a treat for me. I hope it's a treat for the viewers. Thank you so much for joining. Can you close it out? Tell the people where they can find your stuff, how they can support you.
Yeah, real simple. You can find me on Twitter, X, at Dave Kluge, and then everything is over at Football Guys. That's where I've got my articles. I do 9 shows a week in addition to guest spots and all that stuff. So staying busy over at footballguys.com. That's where you can find rankings, articles, podcasts, YouTube videos, all that good stuff.
Yeah, dude. Great. You do a lot of great work. You're one of my favorite follows, one of my favorite people to stay up to date on what your content is. And so thanks for joining the show, guys. If you like the show, give it a like. Subscribe to the Player Profiler Network, and leave any comments for Dave and I. And if we're feeling frisky, we might just answer them. All right. So take care and good luck winning your fantasy leagues.